Welcome back. My name is David Whalen, and this is the Raising Men podcast. I am here today, episode 8, with Rick Ferroni of the Ferroni Hockey Academy, and we're talking everything life, developing youth athletes, hockey players. So here it is, Rick Ferroni. I met Rick Ferroni 2018. My son at the time, he was 6, started training with Rick, tying his own skates, carrying his own hockey bag, some of the things that Rick's very fond of. And now I've had another one of my boys training with Rick, and it's been an amazing experience. I've found that over the years, Rick's style of training when it comes to hockey, skill development, is very unique, very different. There's a lot of people within the hockey community that sort of teach very similar things, pylons, cones, you know, the stuff that we've been doing for years and years. What I really love about bringing my children to Rick is that his style is very unique, very different. It's essentially his own. It's been incredible. So without further ado, welcome aboard, Rick.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hey, man.
That was a pretty good intro.
Trying. We try to keep these as real as possible. So hate it or love it, it is what it is.
Thank you.
Obviously I've been bringing the boys to come and train with you, but, you know, maybe tell us about yourself, how you kind of got to this point, who you are as a person, even stuff I probably don't even know.
I'm still trying to figure that out, who I am as a person, but
Yeah.
How I became a skill developer or hockey developer was out of sheer luck almost. And the first time I ever ran a camp on my own was in 2003 at Niagara University, and I was going to Niagara University playing baseball and hockey there, and my friends wanted to go away to spring break, and I didn't have any money. But I knew I had learned a valuable skill from a Russian mentor who gave me a bunch of skills to practice, and I figured I'd run a hockey camp. And the first hockey camp I ran, I had 17 kids, and one of them was Alex Iafallo, who now plays with the LA Kings.
Oh, wow.
He's the first liner there, and his dad brought himself and his sister, and then a bunch of other kids from Buffalo, West Seneca. And so I just fell into it, and I made some money, enough to go on spring break in Daytona Beach with my friends. And the key was I made money, but I loved it, and I fell in love with, perfecting skills. And maybe I have OCD. I don't know. There's probably a bunch of other letters too, but
Yeah.
I fell in love with perfecting the skills, correcting, and not letting them away with anything. And that's one of the things you talked about, the carrying the bag and tying the skates. And I love putting kids through challenges. I think that was the biggest thing, and watching them struggle. And a lot of people don't enjoy that. I enjoy watching them struggle. That's my favorite thing. So that's kind of how I fell into this.
Yeah.
And then when I finished playing college hockey, I got a job with the Buffalo Sabres as a skating and skills coach. It was a great experience. While I was doing that, I got asked to play pro in the minors. That wasn't for me, and so I went back and continued with the Sabres, and then started my own business, and here we are.
And I believe you've also mentioned you work with Arizona as well, the Coyotes.
The Coyotes. I had an opportunity when Lindsey Hoffer was there. He asked me to come run that for him, and then other opportunities came up in Canada.
Yeah.
I just wasn't ready at the time. There were some things in my life that I had to manage. I had a growing academy, and
Yeah.
I think we had 100 kids when Henry was there.
Yeah.
And it was insane. So that was 7 days. I worked 7 days a week for 12 years straight, and it just
Wow.
wasn't feasible to go out there. And at that time, I had already worked for an NHL team, and it's not as cool as it's made out to be.
Yeah.
The players don't have the passion for perfection like the young kids do, right?
Yeah.
They still have that fire in their belly. I just didn't enjoy it. That when you work with an NHL team, they set the standard, and you don't really get to. Like, I remember a guy, Nathan Gerbe, spilled some yogurt. I told him to pick it up. We got into an altercation. They come down on me. I remember it was DePaulfi and another guy from the Buffalo Sabres leadership came down on me instead of the player.
Yeah.
And that's just not something I want to be a part of. I want to be a part of a culture where it's discipline, loyalty, and respect. So.
Yeah, I know with regards to the academy, obviously bringing the kids there, I've watched sort of the standard that you demand of the children on the ice and expectations of them with regards, again, carrying their bag, and even Henry at 6 having to tie his own skates wasn't a bit of an adventure.
Oh,
but, with all that said, I've also noticed that, kids that were training with you at that time are now some of the top players in Ontario. There's a defenseman for the minor midget Marlies that's one of the top defensemen in
There's
Ontario.
two of them on that team.
Yeah.
There's a defenseman, Luki Draguska, started with me when he was 7 years old, and then the centerman on that team, William Moore, started with me when he was 5.5 in Oakville. So there's two kids there that started from the grassroots fundamental program with me and spent 8, 10, 12 hours a week for years and years. So that'll be fun to watch this year's draft.
Yeah, and then I know George plays for the Titans in the GTHL.
George Raymond.
Yeah, and he, which is really cool. Like, I mean, he spent most of his time training with you, and then instantly like jumps up to playing in the top team in the GTHL, which is pretty cool. But maybe more on, because what I've noticed is that your training style, in terms of the technique, the skating skills, what you teach on the ice is different. Like, where did that start? How did you kind of develop this whole concept of, the Ferroni skating style?
Yeah, so I always describe it as a science project of using a bunch of resources. So the major one, which is 80% of what I do, is Dr. Yasha Smushkin, who passed away December 5th, so 2 weeks ago, and he was my greatest mentor. He was like a father to me. I spent more time with him than I've spent with anybody in my life, and I owe a lot of what I have now, the lifestyle I have, the players I've built, the friendships, the business I have, and the connections I have to Dr. Yasha Smushkin, God rest his soul. And then I mixed in people like Sherry Shaw, who ended up being the skating coach for the Ottawa Senators, Jack Duff from Burlington, one of my favorite tactical coaches of all time, Dan Poliziani, who's out of Oakville, Ontario. My minor hockey coach, Dr. Lou Popovic, who I now train his grandson, and I'm partners with his son. He had a huge influence on my hockey, as he was one of the first ones in Stoney Creek to ever start doing skills training. And what he was doing was grabbing drills from Smushkin, who he had taken his son to first. And he was bringing them back to Stoney Creek, and we were doing them on Saturdays and Sunday mornings. And so I got a little taste of that, and my dad noticed that Mark Popovic was doing really well, and asked his dad and kind of followed him to Smushkin's, and Dr. Yasha Smushkin had us for like 240 hours a summer. And that's almost like doing 6 seasons in one. And so what I did was I took his drills, which were unorganized. So he would go from a crossover drill to a spread eagle drill to a stick handling drill, and it was almost like schizophrenic. And where my dad comes in, which is a huge influence, is he taught me how to organize a curriculum. So what to take and how to progressively build skills. And he learned from a guy named Ron Kerrigan, who's from Burlington, Ontario, who studied the Chinese Taipei Little League Baseball. And my dad was a Little League Baseball superstar. He was on the scorebook for 40 years in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. He's made a famous catch there. Jackie Robinson kind of featured him every single year. And so my dad learned that system through Ronnie Kerrigan, and I just implemented it. And I was able to organize all the Dr. Smushkin drills and the Polizianis and Sherry Shaw drills and Jack Duff's into a curriculum. And I think that's why people appreciate what I do, and they see value in it because it's organized, and there's discipline in it, that comes a lot from Dr. Smushkin, from my dad as well. He taught me that. And then how I manage the ice is my brother, AJ Ferroni, who ran a baseball academy with Damian Blen, who is actually
we're gonna have
another guest of yours. So it comes down to organization. My brother wrote the curriculum for Arizona schools, physical education, and it's called DPE, and it teaches teachers and coaches how to manage your ice surface or your gymnasium or your field with cues like, when I blow the double whistle, you hustle in, last person in, or last two in, go boards and back. And that's kind of what I think the parents value the most, because in my opinion, that's the most important part of my program. The skills I took from other people, and then I build on them and make up my own, but for the most part, the curriculum is from someone else. But the management, on-ice management, is what I think the parents get value out of, because you're getting the most out of your dollar. Your return on investment is a lot greater when you're here because of the discipline.
But I found that, again, this is just my personal experience of bringing both kids there. You know, most of the skills trainers that I've been to, they'll do, 15, 20 drills in a practice. And
Yes.
I see you focus on, maybe 2 or 3.
Yes.
And they're usually quite challenging. Like I see the kids doing it, and I think if I had to do it, I'd be on my ass. But I love the amount of repetitions. And one thing that I think I've realized through all of this is it takes so much repetition to actually learn a skill. And because they're challenging, the way that you've set them up is, having moving on before the kid sort of masters that skill set doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
and I love the way that you set up your camps, because they're doing 20, 30 hours of training, and to some that might be a lot, but rather than going once a week for 1 hour with some skill development guy,
Yes.
where the retention level is not going to be strong, they're spending a whole week working on that skating development or the stick handling development.
That's right.
And it is challenging, but by the end of that week, the child's going to have mastered some of those skills, or at least
And gain
improved.
confidence.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that about the 20 to 30 hours. Is if you think about it, 20 to 30 hours on the ice is more than you actually stand a day in a common day, or move, or
Yeah.
walk.
Yeah.
So skating becomes second nature as opposed to walking, right? So you become more comfortable skating and moving and stick handling, and that's why when they leave the camp and they go play a tournament or something like that after a game, someone's like, what happened to them? Like, why are they performing so well?
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with me. It's they're confident. They built their confidence through the hard work they put in. And I always say, and I think I said it on one of my other videos, is I don't give confidence. These kids build it.
Yeah.
They go through such struggle on the ice and challenge that they build their own. And as I was driving here, it was about a 50-minute drive from Ancaster, I was thinking, you
Yeah.
work out all the time and you're in great shape.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, if you break it down as if you went to the gym every day and lifted light weights
Yeah.
and used the machines that were really easy,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be in the shape that you're in. But what you do is you push yourself, and the times where it hurts the most and you struggle the most is when you grow the most.
Yeah.
And so that's why I push them so hard, and I make them do the drill until they get it right, because that mundane drill that they hate is probably going to be the most important one. And one of my students is Parker Von Richter. He plays for the Mississauga Steelheads now. He started when he was 5.5.
Wow.
And out of the group, him, Michael Hage, William Moore, Battaglia, Bruno, out of all of them, he was the worst one. But he worked the hardest, and he was focused. And no matter how mundane the drill was, he would go through it. And his dad was an Olympian. I think he swam with Michael Phelps at Michigan.
Okay.
And he ended up winning a bronze medal in the Olympics in swimming.
Oh, wow.
And him and I had a conversation. He didn't talk a lot, but when he did, it was poignant. And he said to me, if these kids aren't obsessed with the mundane, they will never be champions. And he didn't really talk to me a lot, but when he did, it was always something unbelievable where he knew that I liked perfection and his kid loved working with me. And he told me that, and that stuck with me. And then you hear the same thing from Customato, who was Mike Tyson's trainer. And then I had the advantage of going out to Vegas and meeting Floyd Mayweather Sr., and he repeated the exact same thing. And I only heard cusses on YouTube, but I got to meet Floyd Mayweather Sr., and he said the same thing.
Wow.
You have to be obsessed with the mundane. And the mundane things I do for the same drill for 30 minutes is where you get the growth, right? Like, I lose my mind
Yeah.
because I've done it for 20 years. So
Yeah.
I hate my voice. I don't want to hear myself talk. But at the end of the day, you see through that struggle, they make change, right?
Yeah.
So
No, I've seen a lot of kids, including Henry, come a long way. I remember that first camp that he did in August when he was 6.
yes,
And maybe a couple months later, I took him to public skating, and you don't recognize the amount of development that they make while they're training with you, because there's all the other kids are there.
yes,
And you can't see it. But then when you go to public skating, or you take them out
To
where
another
they're
team.
with their peers,
Yeah.
and you're like, wow, I didn't realize
the growth,
how much different you are,
absolutely.
which is amazing. And I encourage parents definitely to check out Ferroni Hockey Academy. I think what you're doing, again, as I said, there's a lot of trainers that I do like. I love the culture that you're trying to build. I love the push that you're giving the kids. And I also love the fact that for the most part, your training style is different than what everyone else is doing. And I encourage that difference. You know, I feel like with any type of coaching, it's you know, trying to find the most, you know, people that are good at what they do. And I really feel like it's a huge strength, and I appreciate that. I know you mentioned a lot of guys, but there are a number of NHLers that you've trained. I believe Alex Tuck.
Yeah. So I normally will only mention guys that have trained with me for a long time on all the fundamentals, and they've grown with me. They've stayed at my house. I know their families well. There's probably hundreds of guys in the NHL right now that have come to my a camp or two or something like that.
Yeah.
And I love to mention the guys that spent a ton of time with me, that learned my culture, and they all have good attitudes. They're great kids. Alex Iafallo, Alex Tuck, Mac Hollowell, Connor Timmins, Ben Harper plays for the New York Rangers now. Guys like those have stayed at my house and been a part of my summer camp. I remember back in the day in Lewiston, Alex Tuck stayed with me, and he would make me breakfast in the morning. And then another one of my other guys, this guy Mikey Soucier, who ended up playing college hockey, he would make me breakfast in the morning. This guy Mark Metzger, who was one of my first students ever at that first camp with Alex Iafallo, ended up becoming the skating coach of the Carolina Hurricanes.
Oh, wow.
Which is, it's actually, I don't want to say impressed with myself, but I'm more excited that I created another skating coach like that, right? And there's a bunch of guys that I've mentored who have become skating coaches, and then they've trained NHL players as well, which is what I set out to do, was change hockey. And going back to Dr. Yasha Smushkin, some of the best and most notable trainers, Yari Bierski, his son, and I, Matthew, were instructors or demonstrators for Dr. Yasha Smushkin. And Bierski, I don't think he liked the amount of constructive criticism that Smushkin gave him, went off and started his own skills camp, which is called Skate On.
Yeah.
And then this kid, Daniel Bachner, who I used to help him on the ice at Smushkin's, and I kind of was a demonstrator for him, and he kind of had some discipline issues that, you know, Smushkin helped correct. And now Daniel Bachner is the head of SKA Russia.
Okay.
So he's running an entire organization for a KHL team.
Wow.
Which is very impressive. So the spawns of Smushkin have gone on and been the developers, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you mentioned Mac Hallowell, who recently made his debut with Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yes.
But I loved the fact, like his story, he's not an overly big kid, you know, but from what I understand, he moved from Double A all the way up.
It was single A. He grew up in Chippewa and played single A in Niagara Falls or Chippewa. His town is Chippewa. He's from the city of Niagara Falls, but he played single A. And I think it was Major Adam or Minor Pee Wee, the coach that was coaching with me, had a son on the team that would dominate. He was huge at a young age, and maybe wasn't a full-time hockey guy as a coach. And I said, you know, this kid's a Tiger. He's got grit. We should keep him. No, he didn't really agree with me. So I started calling him up as a call-up. And Mac just worked really hard. He listened. He had a great attitude. And what I've noticed is I predicted he would be an NHL player back then.
Wow.
And same with Tuck. Every single kid that's gone on to play in the NHL, I predicted at a young age, just because of their attitudes and the way they work. Because it is, if you want to play in the NHL and win a Stanley Cup, it's in a war of attrition. It's not about what you do now. It's a war of attrition. How long can you constantly put up with me telling you to switch your hand on your stick? Like that mundane thing, how long can you do that mundane thing? And I noticed that these guys could. So there's a twinkle in the eye that they just love learning, and they have great attitudes. And so Mac went from a single A player to a triple A to an assistant captain to helping us win to getting drafted to the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. I negotiated his contract with the current GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Kyle Dubas.
Yeah.
And so now Kyle Dubas was the GM. Lindsey Hofford, who was a friend of mine, called me, I think it was a night before the draft, and said, what do you think about this kid? And I said, well, he's a Tiger. He'll go through a wall for you, and if you take him, he will be an NHL player. So Lindsey was a head scout at the time, and obviously Kyle Dubas had been around him in the Sioux, same with Connor Timmins, and they took him. I believe he went in and won the fitness test when Babcock was there.
Oh, wow.
And Mac's not a big guy. He weighs 170 pounds.
Yeah.
And so he's fought and clawed his way to the NHL. And I was fortunate enough to see his second game in the NHL. He played New Jersey his first game. I drove down to Pittsburgh, went and saw him. And the first game I saw him is I saw his childhood rival, who I trained as well, Connor Timmins. Connor Timmins was playing with the Phoenix Coyotes, got traded to the Leafs, showed up in Pittsburgh the first time I got to watch Mac play. And the craziest part of the story is how the world works is Chris Letang was Mac Hollowell's favorite player. So he got to play against Chris Letang just before he went, and I think he had a second stroke.
Yeah.
So it was poetic how everything came together. Wow. It's how the universe works, and that's why we're here today, you know?
Wow. Yeah, no, I think it's super cool to watch this development, and obviously with my kids going through, you know, minor hockey and the crazy world that it is.
Yeah.
You know, I guess speaking to parents and other crazy dads,
yeah.
you know, where do you suggest that people focus? I know there's all this attention on spring hockey and spring tournaments, and you know, got to play on the best possible teams. Like, what do you suggest for parents that are wanting to, you know, I know there's politics involved. I know there's challenges and personality differences and issues, and you know, some people didn't like Mac Hallowell, you know, and there's parents that are bringing their kids to you now for those reasons to help develop. And I know, you know, I've kind of watched it, gone through it myself. So what do you suggest as sort of to helping parents create a better athlete, a better, you know, NHL is a bit of a high bar to set, but like, what do you suggest for parents to help improve their athlete?
So first, you mentioned crazy hockey parents and crazy people in the sport, and I think people actually start off and mean well. They just don't know well. Yeah. And I talked to, you know, my girlfriend this morning about that before I left, and I said people, they don't mean to get crazy.
Yeah.
They just want the best for their kids. Yeah. So they don't start off crazy. Yeah. What happens is the sport, which is a business now, preys on the insecurity of a parent who just wants the best for their kid. So a parent doesn't start crazy. Like before you had kids, you weren't crazy about hockey. You know what I'm saying? Like hockey, the sport and the business has preyed on parents who want the best for their kids. And you mean well. Yeah. But do you know well? No, because you've never been through this before. And I don't expect anybody, if you've never been through the tennis or golf or anything, you don't know well. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Maybe Tiger Woods' dad just knew well. He knew enough. He was around the golf course enough to know how it goes. Yeah. So if someone gives you a playbook of how this is going to turn out, you won't be crazy. That parent won't be crazy. That will, because they're following the playbook. They have a protocol they can follow. Yeah. And so I just want to make that clear. As parents don't start off crazy, this sport makes them crazy. And it's unfortunate. And that's one of the biggest things that bothers me is just like the media, they prey on people's insecurities. Yeah. Hey, if you don't come to this brick tournament, you won't play in the NHL because all these people who went here played in the NHL. Well, it's not always the best kids who play there. It's the best kids who are really rich, who can afford to pay $10,000 for a summer when your kid's 8 years old or 9 years old. Yeah. So it's all these tournaments, which Dr. Yasha Smushkin predicted that the first time I was there. The first time I went to his camp, I was 7.5 years old in the summer, and he said to my dad in the stands, he goes, these stupid North Americans will ruin this sport. It'll be all tournaments and money and no development. He predicted that, and that was when I was 8 years old. I'm 40 years old now, a long time ago. And so if it was just like it was before, when there was 1 or 2 tournaments a year, you played 18. I remember I played minor novice and major novice. I had 18 games the one year and 22 the next year. Right now, kids have played 22 games before October's is done. Yeah. So I guess your question was, what's my advice to parents is just calm down. Because it's a war of attrition. Like Mac was a single A player until he was 10. You know, Alex Tuck was a sloppy, uncoordinated, goofy kid when he came to me in Syracuse and said, Mr. Ferroni, I want to play in the NHL. Like, he wasn't a stud. He wasn't a young stud. He was big and lanky and worked hard and had a good attitude, but he wasn't a stud. So I see a lot of these kids who dominate right now because they've put in so much time early. right? They've put in the time early. Everybody's told them how good they are, and guess what? Everybody tells you how good you are. You're not going to go through that challenge, right?
Yeah.
It's just you become comfortable, and comfort is the worst thing that could happen to any of us. It's if you always are going through struggle and always climbing, you're always going to grow. As soon as you start taking a break at the top, that's when your legs get, a little jello-y.
I love that.
So my advice to parents is relax. Let these kids have fun. If they're not having fun, they're not going to continue to work hard. They won't go through it. And if you always praise them for the results, like, hey, you score goals, you're amazing, I love you, they're not going to keep doing it, because then they have to do it every single time or they feel like they failed. But if you're praising these kids for working hard and having fun, they're going to continue to do it. They're kids, right? That's what they want. They want love from their parents. So, like I said, my advice is relax, make them work hard, make sure they have fun, and make sure they enjoy hockey. Mm-hmm. They got to remember they're kids who are playing a game that's the best game in the world.
Yeah, that's true. I have found, like, just recently, I took the boys out to an outdoor rink, like an actual boards outdoor. They have a lot of them in the Toronto area, like an actual, full hockey rink outside. So I took the boys there. We were playing a scrimmage with other dads and other kids, and mixed talent levels, and did that last year during the pandemic. And I feel like that's been, or is, the best form of development, because they're having fun.
Absolutely.
And they're like, I was telling my older boy, he's stick handling around kids, and I said, that's better than any like pylon cone drill.
Absolutely.
You got kids swinging sticks at you.
Yes.
You're having fun, and you're going to learn all the little things, and you're enjoying yourself.
It's funny you mention that, because you're from Brantford, Ontario, which is the hometown of, you were, which is the hometown of Wayne Gretzky, the greatest player of all time. Yeah. And Dr. Yasha Smushkin's favorite player was Wayne Gretzky. Yeah. And he said to my dad, if people would just do what Gretzky did every night, which was 6 hours a night playing pond hockey against his brothers and his neighbors and his friends, I would be out of business. But because the system is rigged and they prey on insecurities, and it's a business, they have tournaments and this and practices every night, the kids can't do that. But if weather permitted, just like Austin Matthews did, which he'd go play 3-on-3 at Arctic ice, called Arctic ice, which is no longer there anymore in Phoenix, Arizona, he would just be playing for 6 hours a day, playing. Yes, he did do training, though. He trained with another Russian guy who, Drozba is his real last name. I believe Smushkin trained him as well. So he did train, he did get the fundamentals, but then he went and took those fundamentals and just played, like you said. And during the pandemic, I did the same thing, went out, and my love for hockey came back. I was like, oh my, pond hockey's where it's at. Like, this is the funnest stuff ever. Yeah. A real game, you got pressure, you got this and that. Pond hockey's just fun. And so that's a part of my advice, is make sure it's fun. Because I still have fun every game I play. And I play one tournament a year in Scottsdale, Arizona. Every single game is amazing. And that has never gone away from me.
One of the questions I wanted to ask, I know I mentioned watching it, but there's an amazing documentary on Disney. Yeah. I believe it's done by ESPN. It's called A Men in Miracle.
Yes.
And I'm again, because I'm raising 3 boys, 2 that are playing right now. I'm constantly trying to learn and understand and work my way through the bullshit. So I watched this documentary, and it's amazing. Like, watching how the development of Russian hockey before, the 1972 series, before the 80s Olympics, how they became the most powerful hockey team in the world. Yes. And their focus on training, and it actually really reminds me of your training school, because of the style of skating. It's so unique. But yeah, I know I recommend watching it. But,
yes.
How, and this is something else on the Wayne Gretzky conversation you're mentioning. I also feel like the secret that Wayne Gretzky had, if there is such a thing as a secret, is he took almost that Russian model and applied it to his style of play, where he was reading the play on a totally different level than if you watch North American hockey. It's very let's see how
Straight up
fast
and
I can
down.
get to the other end.
Yeah.
It just, where Russian hockey is, it's like a flow. It's almost like a dance. And if you watch that documentary, it's very
Yes.
much the same.
Absolutely. And Gretzky, I mean, the last name is Russian.
Yeah.
His last name is Russian. Like
Yeah.
he's Canadian because he grew up in Brantford.
Yes.
But his dad's Russian. His dad's that's a Russian last name.
Yeah.
So he has it in his roots. He has it in his culture, and culture is something that doesn't leave your blood, right? Like, so Smushkin loved him as well, and developed a bunch of drills and systems behind that. And then Anatoly Tarasov is the one you're talking about.
Yes.
And I actually read his book. It's like 780 pages. It's brilliant. And they designed the whole system based on him studying other sports. Mainly the one sport was soccer.
Yes.
He was a soccer guy. He didn't know anything about hockey when he took over the program back in the day. So he started studying other sports.
Yes.
Which, hockey's just a symphony of other sports. Like it's athletic, right?
Yes.
And their biggest thing was puck possession and using, which Dr. Smushkin used to say, the volume of the ice.
Yes.
Right? Like North American hockey has always been straight up and down, which went out of style the day the Russians came over here and beat the NHL All-Star team 12-0.
Yeah.
And then they played the Stanley Cup team, which was Gretzky was on,
Yeah.
the 4-time Stanley Cup team, the Edmonton Oilers, and I think they beat them 10-0 or 10-1. And that's when Gretzky, he has a famous quote saying that we're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Like, these guys are doing it right. They just smoked us. They smoked the NHL All-Stars, and it was just a military team,
Yeah.
right? And it's because their attention to detail. It wasn't accepted, and this is the way I coach too, and a lot of people rubs them the wrong way. It's unacceptable to make a bad pass. In basketball, when a guy makes a bad pass, everybody knows about it, and you don't stay in long if you make bad passes in basketball. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You make a bad pass in soccer, you don't stay in the game. Hockey's the only sport that accepts things like that. Or, like Adam Oates says, he's a tactical trainer now in Ontario and in North America, and he says, first of all, going offside's a bad play. And secondly, missing an opportunity is a bad play. And so what the Russians did was they put emphasis on practicing maintaining the puck and making great plays all the time by supporting each other. So it was always circular support, whereas the North American game is linear. And linear creates less opportunity. Circular creates way more opportunity and confusion for the other team. So they came in with not only better skills, they came in with a better system. And the North American All-Stars and the Edmonton Oilers had no chance. They just had no chance coming in. It's like Mike Tyson when he was in his prime, or Floyd Mayweather still. You just can't beat him. It's a system. You can think you're going to outbox him or out-tough him. You're just not. It just doesn't work. So, and my dad showed me that at a young age, what you're talking about, the Russians. And he always made me watch Gretzky. Our family cried when he retired. As a family, I watched every single one of his games. If I missed it because I was in bed, I watched it the next day. And my dad went through everything. Look at that behind the back. And I had coaches in junior. My brother had coaches in minor hockey. I had coaches in minor hockey that would say, don't do behind the back passes. Don't do that. Don't turn back. Don't cross over in the neutral zone. Actually, hopefully Dr. Lee watches this. He was my coach when I was in minor novice. His son is my best friend. He told me not to cross over in the neutral zone. And now if you look, who's the best player in the NHL right now, or most recognizable, is Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon.
Yeah.
They both cross over like crazy in the neutral zone, creating deceptive speed. So he was telling me to not do it because it was something he didn't know yet.
Yeah.
And like I said, he means well, he just didn't know well.
Yes.
And so that's how things have evolved.
I have noticed that a lot of like the European style players, especially in the NHL, are technically speaking more sound. And I know, speaking with a number of people, Dr. Megan Popovic was mentioning, working with the Maple Leafs and talking with a number of players like Nylander, that they didn't even know what spring hockey was because they didn't have ice at that time of year, or they didn't really play games until, they were 13, 14 years old.
Yes, exactly.
So it's stuff like that I think applies really well to the conversation that we're having today, to your academy. For the listeners at home or people that are watching this, listening, what is it that what do you want to leave the listener with today? What do you want to tell them?
How much time do I have?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
one is this should come as a shock to people because of what they believe and what the media tells them in Ontario is Toronto does not produce the most NHL players per capita. So my dad taught me this at a young age is batting average and save percentage are the things that matter because Ontario or Toronto does not have a good batting average for producing high-end NHL players. Sweden, where Nylander's from, Stockholm, Sweden, produces the most per capita out of anybody in the entire world. They're not allowed to play games until they're 12, right? Thunder Bay in Canada produces the most NHL players per capita. They have the best batting average of any place in Canada. In the United States, it's called Warad, Minnesota. And I'm wearing the shirt right now, Warad. They produce the most NHL players per capita in the United States.
Wow.
Thunder Bay is a small town, has two pads. Warad has 2 pads. Stockholm, Sweden, doesn't have a ton of rinks. They don't have the rinks in the summer or the spring. What are they doing differently? And this is the shock to hopefully viewers who are going, oh my God, what have I been told?
Yeah.
What has Toronto been telling me that I have to go to the GTHL to be an NHL superstar? I have to play here. I have to play in this. I have to play in the brick. That's just business. That's business. Yes, you do get recognized in the GTHL because that's where most of the scouts live and most of the agents live, but you still got to be an NHL player.
Yeah.
Just because they see you all the time and you're doing well at 12 doesn't mean you're going to be an NHL player. They still have to make money off you. So in the end, if someone from Thunder Bay is going to make them more money, Claude Giroux, the Stahl brothers, all 3 of them, they're going to get them to the NHL. They're going to represent them. And they've just been trained better. You know, they've done 12 hours on the ice every single day in Thunder Bay. They're having fun. They're playing with older guys. They're doing all the things that parents don't want their kids doing now because the media here and everything they hear is telling them to do the exact opposite. But if someone's batting average is 500, I want to do what they do.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what we've designed the academy around. And so to leave the viewer, it's you have to find who's doing it the best and do it better. Mm-hmm. And that's what great business people do. You know, you look at any top company in the world, someone's following somebody. Someone has seen the mentor, had a mentor, and they're doing exactly what they're doing, but then adding on top of it. So if you are the parent that wants your kid to be elite this, and move all the obstacles, you're just being sold snake oil. Mm-hmm. That's all you're being sold. So don't be sold the snake oil. Go, who does it the best? Who produces the most? I want to do it like them. Because you can't fight science. If you light gasoline, it goes on fire. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, that's science. You can't fight facts. And Smushkin used to say it all the time. This is of a fact. If you do this, this will happen. So, but you get sold to do something else. Yeah. Why? Because it makes money. It's business. Yeah. So, don't get caught buying snake oil. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I put myself in the same category. You know, as I said earlier, I'm, as a parent, working my way through it, navigating through it. You know, I had a great conversation with Andy Paquette of the Power Tech podcast recently. Yeah. You know, I spoke to Mark Popovic on the phone. Yeah. Constantly, you know, with yourself getting advice. You know, I think as a parent, as a dad, you know, my kids are light years ahead of where I was. I was basically a meathead when I played. By the time, you know, my kids are talented for their age. And I'm trying to steer them in the right direction and stay away from all the craziness. Yes. While at the same time, I think, you know, as a dad, your ego gets involved and you want to watch certain things. But yeah, I am realizing more and more every day that sort of avoiding the business side of it and spending time and developing an athlete for the long term. Absolutely. And when I say athlete, I mean, this applies to sort of any sport, really, right? I know Damien Blen trains his athletes very, very similarly. So with all that said, more specifically, Rick Ferroni, I guess to finish off our podcast today, you know, who are you at the core? What are you as a person beyond just hockey itself?
I'm always seeking efficiency, and I have 5 other businesses: an artificial intelligence company, a parking app company, a student rental company. I've always wanted to make things more efficient. And my dad tells a story, people used to say I was lazy because I didn't want to write notes in class, so I started taking Polaroids of the notes.
Yeah.
And my teacher would call me lazy and stupid.
Wow.
And maybe 20 years later, Apple comes out with photos on your phone, and now when you go to university, it's called Blackboard.
Yeah.
It's taking photos for you. So was I the stupid and lazy one, or was I just 20 years ahead?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so that's who I am, and that explains me the best. And my dad told that story at my wedding, because he's like, people always had him pegged wrong.
Yeah.
He was just trying to find the best way. And so that's why being a hockey developer is the best thing for me, because every single day I'm trying to find something new. And I never say that I know it all. I'm always researching. Every single day I want to learn something new. And so to describe me the best is I want to be efficient in everything I do, in business, in my personal life, in hockey. I just want to be efficient. I want things to be great. And so, you know, a lot of people ask me, what do you want out of this?
Yeah.
I want to win a Stanley Cup. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Like, ever since I was a kid, I didn't say I wanted to play in the NHL. I didn't say I wanted to be a millionaire. I had no idea the money he could make. I wanted to win a Stanley Cup. I seen Gretzky win in 1988, I think it was. 88 or 89. I forget what it was. I was 7 or 8. And I saw that and was like, I want to do that. I want to win a Stanley Cup, and I still do. And whether it's one of my players winning a Stanley Cup, Alex Tuck came close if he could bury against the Washington Capitals in 2018. But I want to win a Stanley Cup. So if I get hired with an NHL team, and I won't take just any NHL team. If a team has the right culture and they're focused on doing the right things, I want to win a Stanley Cup. That's what I want out of hockey, and I want that for my players too. So if I can help one of my guys win a Stanley Cup, then that's my win as well. And maybe it sounds like I'm living through them. Yeah. I am, and the more I live through them, the more I give to them. You know what I mean?
No, I love that. That's powerful. I highly suggest anybody that's listening in that they get some time, go and train in the Ferroni Hockey Academy. They're in Stoney Creek, Hamilton, Ontario. Rick has done wonders for my children, and I've watched a lot of other children that are succeeding because of that, and obviously a number of professional hockey players and people that are trainers, and there's so much more to it. So Rick, I appreciate your time on the podcast today.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. It was awesome. It was fun.
Tune in again. This is episode number 8 of the Raising Men podcast. My name is David Whalen. This is Rick Ferroni of the Ferroni Hockey Academy. And again, you definitely got to get yourself out there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.